If you're trying to make any kind of meaningful, effective change in your life, you've come to the right place. Hi. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, or good morning or good evening, depending on what time it is in your neck of the woods. Welcome back to part 2 of an episode that John and I started talking about last week. So if you missed part 1, please stop, go back, listen to part 1, and then come back on over here for part 2 of our talk about consciousness, a key to life. Otherwise, this episode is going to seem a little odd. It may, if you missed all the buildup, so it may seem a little out of context and not make a lot of sense. So make sure you go back and listen to part 1 first, then come back and join us for part 2. All right, let's jump in. If the consciousness isn't there to accompany the new experience of life, you won't be able to hang on to it. It will slip through your fingers like water, right?
It's incredible when you break this down, and again, because the people that are watching this say, well, that's great and it's factual. Well, let's bring it a little bit closer to home, because I can attest to exactly what Loree's saying. I was a youth minister for 12 years. I finished youth work in 2016 physically, but emotionally I didn't finish there, because I took on the political baggage, the anger, the frustration, and I had that and I held that for nearly 5 years before eventually, and this was one of the things I don't think necessarily, maybe I was subconsciously seeking it, but I wasn't actively seeking it. Came across Wayne Dyer's teaching within 2 hours. And this is why Loree and I are laughing, because it was like within 2 hours, bang, 5 years worth of severe anger and bitterness and all of the stuff. I went and told my wife. She was like, oh my goodness, that's incredible. But here's the real amazing thing, folks, with what Loree's talking about here is, how fast things can change when you change your consciousness. So January of this year, 2021, if you're watching this in the future, I went through those changes. Literally, I took a 2-month sabbatical. I remember telling Loree, and I was like, oh, I've got to come back to work now. It was that strange thing. We kept in touch a little bit, but we'd met, online, and we were talking about coaching and all sorts of other things. Never anything else. And then as things really started to rapidly change for me, I started to talk to Loree about, other opportunities, other business opportunities. From there, it started opening up with, all these business opportunities flowed. I didn't have to do a damn thing about them. I literally put out the net, and what came back was incredible, because I changed my consciousness, because I started listening to the positive teaching. I started taking control of my own self, my own inner engineering, as opposed to relying on someone to do it for me and just hoping, oh, I'm going to get better now. And that's unfortunately, I think what a lot of people do is they hear the idea of change, or the idea of consciousness and becoming more aware. And they think, man, this is such a big issue. This is such a big thing. And I need to do so much. It's like, you actually don't. All you need to do is change what's going on in here. And that's going to change how you start to think about things. Life isn't what happens, to us. It's how we respond to it. I now, I don't allow myself to get worried or angry about what has been. I just get to a point where I'm like, ex-boss, I send you love. If you knew better, you would have done better, but you were conditioned. I can't control what you do. All I can control is myself. And when you do that and you start to take control of yourself, literally your entire world will change. And Loree and I was talking a little bit about this before we came on air, of all the things that have happened in 10 months. Our income has tripled. We're being invited to special speaking events with some of the big name speakers. We're doing a lot of different things, and it all changed because I changed my state of thinking, my level of consciousness, my awareness, because I realized if I wanted to actually get rid of the bitterness, anger, and all of the other negative stuff that was there, I need to do something about it, as opposed to just believing that it would happen, which when you just leave it, it doesn't often change. It just festers, and then it crops up, and feelings buried alive never die. They just keep coming back time and time again. So there's a little testimonial story for you.
No, I love it. And what you said there is so key about, changing the way you were thinking about things, turning things around so that it wasn't so much dwelling on negative. But what I want to add to that is, so opportunities started to come to you when you made that mindset shift. But then you didn't just do nothing. You took action
Yes.
So it's not about just waiting for, an opportunity to show up on your doorstep and then everything, blossoms for you.
Hmm.
The doors can be open and the opportunities or the people or the things may start to show up in your world, but then you need to put boots to the ground and you need to do something, right?
Absolutely, because that is absolutely true. Because it's great having the idea and the intention, but then you need to have, like Loree was saying, the action behind it. So it was literally, saying, Loree, I've got this idea, for working with teenagers. What do you think? Didn't know where I was necessarily going with it, and that's happened with several other people in business throughout this year. And it's
Mhm.
literally, like you say, preparation meets for your opportunity. You've got to be prepared. So that's why I study all the time. That's why, I'm reading, listening, on and on and
Mhm.
on. And Loree does the same to make
Mhm.
sure that when those opportunities come, and they will, that you are prepared, because otherwise you squander your opportunity. So it's really
Right.
important that you are prepared for sure. But again, you've got to take action. I think that's a really important thing. And just to follow on what you were
Mhm.
saying about change, because it was something that I'd explored and examined and studied earlier on this year. What tends to happen when a person makes a change, and you got it absolutely right, is that they like the idea of the transition. They like the idea of the change, whether it's weight loss, whether
Mhm.
it's going to the gym, or whatever it might be. And then all of a sudden, a couple of months down the line, it starts getting a little bit harder. The nights start getting darker. It's rainy, it's miserable, it's whatever. And then what happens is, as human beings, from a psychological point of view, we revert back to our
Mhm.
default setting. This doesn't just happen with our bodies. I remember talking to Loree about this, and telling about some findings that I'd found with my psychological studies. It happens with the mind as well. So a person who's learning how to juggle, their brain lights up. They stop learning how to juggle, their brain goes back to the normal,
Mm.
way of
Yeah.
being. Their
The
previous
factory setting.
a factory set. That's why I call it, all this study, my mental medication, because it's
Mhm.
literally the very thing that's taking me from where I am to where I want to be, helping others, etc., etc. But is it then possible to go back the other way? Well, of course it is. Because if I've been
Mhm.
able to condition myself that way, I can also condition myself another way, which is going back to the higher level of
Right.
consciousness of, you need to be in control of what you listen to, who you speak to, who you surround yourself with. And it is
Right.
so important when you're willing to make those changes. You've got to go all the way, because what happens is
Mhm.
you get to that transition, you get to the second stage, and you're like, it's no man's land. This is a little bit weird. This is uncomfortable. And most
Mhm.
people go backwards, as opposed to
Mhm.
getting to that third stage. And it's, I think, William Bridges that talks about this in his book Transitions, phenomenal book. And he talks about this: when people get to the third stage, they get to a point where they're like, oh wow, this is incredible, this new way of thinking, this new way of being, this new fill in the
Yeah.
blank, and it's incredible. But you've got to keep on going
Mhm.
forward with the new life that you've chosen.
Yeah, you have to. It's a practice.
Yeah.
It's literally a continual, nonstop practice. And when you stop practicing, then you'll either stop there or
Yeah.
like you said, you revert. Exactly. I think people who achieve success, by their own definition,
Mhm.
at whatever they've embarked upon, they have changed their inner world. They've changed their consciousness. And then they experience the lasting and effective changes that they were seeking in
Yeah.
their outer world and in their life experience. And this is such an important distinction to understand in regards to your own life. So make sure you get that your outer world, that is your physical body on out. It's not out there. It's as close as your physical body. Your physical body is your outer world. The I am of you
Mhm.
is your inner world. Your consciousness is your inner world. So m- making sure that you get that distinction. Your How do I say this? This is actually another one of my of Fox's sayings, and I love it. And it's just to put a period at the end of this particular segment. By right of consciousness, you will do, and you will be, and you will have, for better or for worse. And that is by right of
I
consciousness.
love that.
So, isn't that awesome?
Yeah,
It's very
that's
simple,
yeah,
but it's right on target.
yeah.
So if you want to change your circumstances and your experience of life, and you want to become a more enlightened human being, then you first must change your mind, which is what, we're all about here, right? That's the antidote to being stuck. It means you have to be willing to shift your thinking. You have to begin to elevate your consciousness. You must proactively put yourself on the path to learning self-mastery, which is something you touched on a little bit earlier. And, in that, did you ever read As a Man Thinketh by James Allen?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right? Okay. I love that book. It's really a booklet. I mean, it's not a big, it's like 50 pages.
I was going to say, it's like 50 pages or something. Yeah.
It's like 50 pages. I mean, if you are somebody that can sit still for 20 minutes, you can read it. You know what I mean? So I have this favorite passage that, and it's actually the whole book. My whole book is yellow because I've highlighted almost the entire thing. It's like, oh, I need to highlight that and come back to it. And so the entire book is now highlighted. But I want to read literally the introduction from that book, and it really sets the tone. Well, first of all, let's before I do that, let's say self-mastery. Since we've kind of segued into that, is it's being the master of your thoughts and emotions. And this is a concept that you do not want to ignore. Now, As a Man Thinketh is a book. It was written by British writer James Allen. It was published in 1903, so it's been around for a minute. It became a best-selling classic. Anyone that is a student of personal growth knows of this book. James Allen was known for his inspirational work. He's regarded as one of the pioneers in personal development and the self-help movement. And the book is essentially about how thoughts influence our character, our circumstances, our health, our purpose, and our achievement. It teaches a fundamental way to help you learn how to help yourself. So personally, I think it should be a mandatory reading in school, right? Like, by the time you are about 13, 14, you should be taught this. The introduction of this book, I'm going to read it. It's a powerful little start, but this is a kind of a cool, I guess it's kind of a poem, but it says, "Mind is the master power that molds and makes, and man is mind. And evermore he takes the tool of thought, and shaping what he wills, brings forth 1,000 joys, 1,000 ills. He thinks in secret, and it comes to pass. Environment is but his looking glass."
Yeah. Spot on.
Pretty well sums up what we've started talking about. And that's just the introduction. So I would say, anybody that's listening to this and is intrigued, I would highly encourage you to go pick up that little booklet and sit down and make yourself read it and really be open to what it's telling you. Anyway, cool, right?
It's really awesome. And it's also available, folks, in audio form. Not that we're trying to pitch you or do anything, but you can go to YouTube right now and you can check the book out. And it's true. And I was making a little note there, that just to, I suppose, as a reminder to folks that whether it's good or bad, what you focus on, I can't get this over enough, is what you very well and very easily can attract into your life. And I think that's really part of the theme of what we're talking about today, to be very much aware of your thoughts, how you speak about yourself, and everything else. I think, it's so important. I think it's one of the most fundamental teachings that has to, at some point in the near future, be taught in schools, because they need to hear this.
Yeah, maybe it will. I mean, the educational system is going through quite
Hmm.
quite the chaos right now. So we'll see what happens with that. Uh, but I think another thing that is we should talk about for a minute because it's an important distinction, and I think it's just because of the terminology is the difference between being woke and being awake. um, because that's, it's such a big thing. But being woke and wokeism is something that is quite up for a lot of people right now, and it's a very influential and controversial, I don't know, way of being, thinking, subject, topic. I don't know what you want to call it, but because it's so because of the word, I I feel like we need to talk a little bit about the distinction between being woke and being awake, because being awake is part of what we're talking about here with being on the path to a higher consciousness or becoming more aware of up leveling your own consciousness. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm intrigued.
Okay. So, well, I'll be intrigued to. I mean, do you? So before I like give my take on this,
Okay.
because it is just my take.
Hmm.
I could be off base. I could be wrong. Whatever. I'm just gonna say here's my take. But do you have your own definition of woke, or what is your understanding of being woke?
See, over here in the UK, it's not something that's really that I'm aware of anyway, has really reached us yet.
Mm,
In terms of awakened, again, for me at least, we're talking about a spiritual awakening where you're
hmm
aware of something a lot more than just yourself.
hmm
Again, like I was saying earlier on, the sun setting right now, beautiful red and golden skies. It's that time of year that I always look forward to. I'm aware of that spiritually. I feel it inside.
hmm
For other people, that they don't like the phrase spirituality or spiritual because of all the negative connotations that's there. So they look for their definition in another way, if that makes sense. But I think in some ways, it's all roads that are leading to the same place. It's finding that deeper place within yourself and
hmm
activating and realizing, hey, you actually have this next level to yourself that you,
hmm
you didn't have. And again, I was jotting down a note that sometimes people succeed in business when they're going through those negative emotions, they're feeling horrible, all of those lower consciousness things that we talked about, and they make it successfully, but they're miserable, and it has to be forced in order to do it. When you start to become more awakened of something bigger and larger than yourself that's actually trying to assist you, that's moving through heaven and earth to help you, all of a
hmm
sudden it becomes more joyful, more, energetic. I've been up since 4 a.m. this morning. You wouldn't know it, and it's literally just like, yes, we're doing this
Yeah.
because, you just feel so much different. And it's not, but folks, I should tell you, I've been on both sides of the coin. I've been there where I've been like, okay, this is freaky deaky doo kind of stuff. I've been on the other side where I'm like, wow, this is incredible because I've experienced it for myself. That's one of the things for both Loree and I that sets us apart from so many other people, is we've experienced it from both sides of the coin. So what we're talking about here isn't this really weird stuff, because I can tell you what it was like to be angry and frustrated. You go through those human emotions, but I can also tell you what it's like to come on the other side and for those shackles and chains to be
Yeah.
dropped. I'm going on a tangent here, but so that's
That's
my
good.
understanding in some ways. So
Yeah.
how about you,
Yeah,
Loree?
no, that's good. It's good because I mean, that's how a lot of people feel or have
Mm,
felt.
mhm.
So I think that's interesting that it's not, being woke is not such a big thing over there, but
Yeah.
it's a big deal over here. Um, and I guess for me, the way I look at it, and my understanding, what I hear, what I see demonstrated, what I read, that woke is an ideology, and it appears to be based on people's ideas about what they think are acceptable social doctrines and morals. It's not about raising the consciousness of the individual or about spiritual
Okay.
maturity, shall we say. it's being demonstrated as a way to influence other people
Mhm.
to agree with their opinions and rules about what to think and how to behave.
Yeah.
Now, being awake is a completely different animal. They're two different, completely different universes. Being awake is about raising your consciousness, right? It's about a person's quest to become a more awakened human being, to awaken to one's true nature. It's a spiritual quest or a goal of creating a much higher understanding of themselves, of others, of the true nature of existence. So, awakening to a higher level of consciousness is an inwardly directed process, right? It's an inner process of personal transformation, whereas wokeism is outwardly directed.
Yeah.
So the person on the path to enlightenment, to raising their consciousness and becoming more awake, is
Mm.
focused on changing or evolving their self, whereas the woke person is intently focused on changing everyone else.
Yeah. Yeah.
Does that make
Yeah,
sense?
I was just looking there at Wikipedia, and Wikipedia define it as a well-informed person that makes their decisions based on their external world, as opposed to, like, say, awake, which is, I suppose, more instinctive, if that's the right word.
Well, it's just more spiritual.
More spiritual. Yeah, yeah.
One's not.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, when I looked at that, the first phrase that came into my mind from Wikipedia with wokeism is almost like a group of people telling you how it should be and how it is, as opposed to, like you said, the spiritual, which is obviously going in a very different direction for sure. So very interesting. But no, that as far as I'm aware, that isn't something that's actually over here in the UK. So
Mm-hmm.
that's interesting
Mm-hmm.
for sure. We don't want it
Yeah, yeah.
here.
It's just different, and I think that because the words are rather closely related, and
Mhm.
uh, because of our subject matter, and I just want to make a clear
Yeah.
distinction on what we're talking about because they're two very different things. So anyway, I think you know I think this was a lot, I think, for people to start to digest today. And I'm thinking that we're going to come back next week and we're going to carry on with this a little bit more. We're going to talk more specifically about some things. And eventually, we'll leave people with some things that they can do to raise their own consciousness, to start to develop a higher consciousness, if that's something that seems like a good idea. So,
Sounds like a good plan to me.
okay, perfect. So, you guys, thank you for hanging out with John and I today. This is interesting, and I'm looking forward to next week and diving in some more. It's again, it's such a big, it's complicated. It's a complicated topic, and there's a lot to it. So, I think before people start to think about, but wait a minute here, I can't, all these things happen, and it has nothing to do with the way I was thinking or the thoughts that I was dwelling on. I get it. I get it. And we'll talk more about that. So don't get too flustered, and start getting defensive. Just stay open. Just be willing to consider, and we'll see what happens next week. All right. So that's a wrap for today. Make sure to subscribe if you haven't already so you don't miss the upcoming episodes. And of course, to find out what personal coaching is all about with me, head on over to loreebischoff.com. Give us a rating and a review. If you would just take a minute to do that, it would be wonderful. Be very meaningful to us, and it inspires other people to listen to all the great shift being shared here. So until next week, stay feisty, my friends. Mind your mind and go make some epic shifts happen in your lives. You too, Gary V.